You think you know what China looks like. Shanghai's skyline, the Great Wall, crowded streets in Beijing, maybe a panda somewhere in the back of your mind. That China exists. But it is a tiny fraction of a country that is roughly the size of the entire continental United States, containing landscapes and villages and feats of engineering so far outside the standard tourist narrative that most people, including most Chinese people, will never see them in person. A city built directly into the side of a cliff, where the ground floor and the 22nd floor are accessed from completely different streets. And at night, it looks like the concept art for a film that hasn't been made yet. A telescope so large that it isn't built on a platform or a mountain, it is built inside a hole in the earth, a natural sinkhole large enough to contain the largest single-dish radio telescope on the planet. Circular fortress villages built from rammed earth that have housed entire extended clans for 6 centuries, designed to withstand bandits, floods, and time itself. A lake in the far northwest that changes color depending on where you stand, what time of day it is, and what the sky is doing above it, surrounded by golden birch forests and villages where Mongolian herders still live the way their ancestors lived 1,000 years ago. This is not the China of the postcards. This is the China that exists between the cities, around the monuments, behind the headlines. This is what they never show you. Let's go. Before we go any further, if this is the kind of travel content you came to YouTube for, subscribe to Rome Folios right now. Every week, we take you somewhere the world forgot to look. Hit subscribe. Let's keep going. The China nobody photographs. Chongqing is one of the largest cities on Earth by population, over 32 million people in its greater metropolitan area, more than the entire population of several European countries combined. Most people outside China have never heard of it. It sits at the confluence of the Yangtze and Jialing rivers, built across a landscape of hills and cliffs so dramatic that the city has been forced for decades to build vertically and laterally at the same time, creating a 3-dimensional urban environment unlike anywhere else on the planet. Buildings here have entrances on multiple levels that connect to completely different streets. A single skyscraper might have its ground floor opening onto a riverside boulevard and its 22nd floor opening onto a hillside road that a visitor would assume was nowhere near a tall building at all. People get lost in Chongqing constantly, not because the city is poorly designed, because the city is designed for terrain that doesn't behave the way terrain behaves anywhere else. And nowhere in Chongqing captures this more dramatically than Hongyadong. By day, Hongyadong looks like an unusual but fairly ordinary, stilt-building wooden structures built up the side of a cliff face above the Jialing River, an architectural style called Diaojiaolu that has existed in this region for centuries, designed to maximize living space on terrain too steep for conventional construction. By night, it transforms into something that looks like it escaped from a different century, entirely a future one. 11 stories of stacked structures cascade down the cliff face, each level lit in a different combination of warm gold and electric color, the lights reflecting off the dark water of the Jialing River below, the whole structure rising against the Chongqing skyline like something between an ancient fortress and a spaceship that decided to settle down on a riverbank. Tourists from elsewhere in China travel specifically to see Hongyadong at night. International visitors, by comparison, are rare. Most people outside Asia have simply never heard the name, which is remarkable, given that what they're missing is one of the most visually extraordinary urban environments anywhere in the world. 500 kilometers southwest of Chongqing, in the Karst Mountains of Guizhou Province, there is a hole in the ground that contains the most powerful instrument human beings have ever built to listen to the universe: the 500-meter aperture spherical radio telescope. FAST. The Chinese name translates roughly as Sky Eye. Guizhou's karst landscape, limestone terrain, riddled with sinkholes, caves, and natural depressions formed over millions of years of water erosion, provided something that engineers searching for a telescope site desperately needed: a naturally occurring bowl-shaped depression large enough and deep enough to house a radio dish 500 meters in diameter without the astronomical cost of excavating one artificially. The dish is built from 4,450 individual reflector panels, suspended over the natural sinkhole, forming a surface so large that if filled with wine, it could provide every person on Earth with approximately 5 bottles. It is more than twice the size of the previous record holder, the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico, which has since collapsed. FAST is now, by a significant margin, the largest single-dish radio telescope on the planet. It is so sensitive that the Chinese government relocated approximately 9,000 people from the surrounding area, creating a radio silence zone designed to eliminate the electromagnetic interference that human technology produces: cell phones, Wi-Fi, even certain electrical appliances, in order to allow the telescope to detect signals from billions of light years away without interference from nearby villages. The telescope has discovered hundreds of new pulsars since beginning operations in 2016, rapidly rotating neutron stars that emit beams of radiation with a regularity more precise than any clock built by human hands. It has been used in the search for fast radio bursts, mysterious, powerful, millisecond-long bursts of radio energy from deep space, whose origin remains one of the most compelling open questions in modern astrophysics. And it sits almost entirely unknown to the international public in a remote valley in one of China's poorest provinces, surrounded by the same karst peaks and caves that have made this region of China remarkable for reasons that have nothing to do with astronomy. A handful of villages near the telescope have been redeveloped with tourism in mind. There is a visitor center, a viewing platform, but the scale of the thing, the genuine scale of standing at the edge of a 500-meter dish built into the floor of a sinkhole in the mountains, surrounded by jungle, listening in the most literal sense to the universe, is something that very few people outside China have ever experienced in person. It should be one of the most visited engineering marvels on Earth. For now, it remains one of the least visited. The villages that built themselves into fortresses. In the mountainous Yongding district of Fujian province in southeastern China, there are buildings that look from above like something between a fortress, a stadium, and a UFO that decided to put down roots. Hakka Tulo. Circular, multi-story communal residences built by the Hakka people, a Han Chinese subgroup whose history is defined by centuries of migration, displacement, and the search for defensible places to settle. The Hakka began arriving in this mountainous region of Fujian during periods of political upheaval in northern and central China, dating back over 1,000 years. As outsiders in a region with its own established populations, often in remote and contested terrain, they developed an architectural solution to a very specific problem. How do you build a home that can shelter an entire extended clan, sometimes hundreds of people, and that can withstand bandits, wild animals, floods, and armed conflict, using only the materials available in a remote mountain valley? The answer was the Tulu. Massive circular or rectangular structures built from rammed earth mixed with glutinous rice, sugar, and bamboo strips for structural reinforcement, with walls up to 2 meters thick at the base. The exterior walls have almost no windows at ground level, a defensive design choice, since the building's outer wall functioned, in effect, as a fortress wall. Inside, the structure opens into a central courtyard, around which multiple stories of living quarters are arranged in concentric rings, connected by wooden walkways and staircases. A single large tulu might house an entire clan of several hundred people, with shared wells, shared ancestral halls, shared storage for grain, and individual family living quarters arranged around the communal core. Some of the largest tulus still standing today are over 600 years old, and many of them are still inhabited. Walking into a working tulu through the single heavily fortified entrance into the open courtyard, surrounded on every side by wooden balconies where laundry hangs to dry and children play, and elderly residents sit in the afternoon, sun is to walk into a building that has been continuously occupied by descendants of the same family for 20 generations or more. The Hakka built these structures because they had to, because survival for a community without political power in contested territory required architecture that doubled as defense. What they created, almost as a byproduct of necessity, was some of the most extraordinary vernacular architecture in human history. UNESCO recognized 46 Tulu structures as World Heritage Sites in 2008. Most of the thousands of others that still exist throughout the region remain almost entirely unknown outside China. 300 kilometers to the west, in the mountains of Guizhou province, the Dong ethnic minority has built a different kind of architectural tradition, one defined not by defensive walls, but by towers that reach toward the sky. Zhaoxing, the largest Dong settlement in China, is built along a river valley and organized around 5 massive drum towers, wooden structures built entirely without nails, using a system of interlocking joints that Dong carpenters have refined over centuries. The drum towers serve as the social and ceremonial heart of each clan within the village. They are where disputes are settled, where festivals are held, where the community gathers in the evening to talk, to sing, and increasingly rarely, to practice a tradition that defines Dong culture more than almost anything else: polyphonic singing. Dong choral singing performed without instrumental accompaniment in complex multi-part harmonies passed down orally for generations, was recognized by UNESCO as part of humanity's intangible cultural heritage in 2009. It is one of the only folk choral traditions in the world that developed independently of Western harmonic theory, producing intervals and structures that sound, to ears trained on Western music, both utterly foreign and completely natural at the same time. The villages are connected by wind and rain bridges, covered wooden bridges that serve a practical purpose, sheltering travelers from the elements, and a social one, functioning as gathering places where villagers rest, talk, and conduct small trade. Some of these bridges are several hundred years old, built using the same nail-free joint construction as the drum towers, maintained and occasionally rebuilt by communities that have preserved the specific carpentry knowledge required across dozens of generations. The Dong people number around 3 million across southern China. Their architecture, their music, and their way of life remain almost entirely unknown outside a small circle of cultural anthropologists and the increasing number of domestic Chinese tourists who have discovered Guizhou's ethnic minority regions in the past 2 decades. International visitors remain rare. The landscapes carved by hand. In the hills of Guangxi province, in southern China, there is a landscape that took the Yao and Zhuang ethnic minorities over 600 years to build, not with machines, with hands and water buffalo and an understanding of hydrology and terrain so precise that the system they constructed continues to function, essentially unchanged today. Longji. The name means dragon's backbone, and it refers to the way the terraced rice paddies follow the natural contours of the hillsides in winding, layered patterns that, from above, genuinely resemble the scaled spine of something enormous and serpentine, curling across the landscape. The terraces were built beginning in the Yuan dynasty in the 13th century and expanded continuously through the Ming and Qing dynasties. As the local population grew and the demand for arable land in this mountainous region increased, building a single terrace required diverting water from mountain streams through an elaborate system of channels, calculating the gradient precisely enough that water would flow continuously from the highest terraces to the lowest without flooding any single level, and reinforcing the earthen walls with packed clay and stone to withstand monsoon rains. Multiply that process across thousands of individual terraces, climbing the hillsides in elevations ranging from 300 to 1,100 meters, and you begin to understand the scale of the engineering achievement involved. This was not infrastructure built by an empire with unlimited resources. This was built by farming communities, terrace by terrace, generation by generation, using nothing but accumulated knowledge and physical labor. The terraces change character completely with the seasons. In late spring, when the fields are flooded in preparation for planting, the entire hillside becomes a mirror. Thousands of individual water-filled terraces reflecting the sky in a layered, fractured pattern that seems to multiply the sky itself across the landscape. In summer, the rice grows tall and green, and the hillsides turn a deep, saturated emerald that shifts in the wind like fabric. In autumn, before harvest, the terraces turn gold every shade between pale yellow and deep amber, depending on the angle of the light and the specific stage of ripeness in each individual terrace. The Yao women who live in the villages scattered among the terraces are known, in particular, for a tradition that has made them something of a curiosity even within China. Many Yao women never cut their hair after a certain age, washing it instead with a fermented rice water rinse that they believe preserves its strength and color. Some women in these villages have hair exceeding 1.8 meters in length taller than they are. Longji's villages hold several entries in the Guinness World Records for the longest hair in a community, a distinction that has, somewhat unexpectedly, become part of how the region is known to the small number of outside visitors who make the journey. The terraces are still farmed today by descendants of the people who built them, using methods that have changed only marginally over 7 centuries. Standing on a ridge above Longji at sunrise, watching mist rise from the flooded terraces while a farmer leads a water buffalo along a path between paddies that her ancestors carved by hand 700 years ago, it becomes difficult to think of this landscape as scenery. It is something closer to a monument that happens to still be functioning exactly as intended. If you're still with me, and what's coming next is some of the strangest, most remote territory in this entire country, subscribe to Rome Folios right now. This is what we do. Every week, somewhere the world forgot to look. Hit subscribe. The Far West. In the far northwestern corner of China, in the Xinjiang region, where the country's borders meet Mongolia, Russia, and Kazakhstan simultaneously, there is a lake that has confused travelers and locals alike for centuries. Canas Lake. Formed by glacial activity over 200,000 years ago, fed by meltwater from the Altai Mountains, Canas Lake sits at the heart of one of the most ecologically distinct regions in all of China, a landscape that, in terms of climate and vegetation, has more in common with Siberia and Mongolia than with the China most of the world imagines. The lake's most famous characteristic is its color, which is not fixed. Depending on the season, the angle of sunlight, the mineral content carried down from glacial melt, and the specific weather conditions on any given day, Canas Lake shifts between deep emerald green, turquoise, milky jade, and a deep, almost ink-like blue. Local legend holds that the lake is home to a creature, the Canas Lake monster, locally called Hukuo, said to resemble a giant red fish, large enough to swallow livestock that wander too close to the shore. Reported sightings persist to this day, generally explained by researchers as encounters with unusually large taimen, a species of giant salmon native to the region that can grow to lengths exceeding 2 meters. Whether or not the legend has any basis in biology, it has become part of the regional identity in a way that adds an additional layer of mystery to an already strange and remote landscape. The forests surrounding Canas Lake are home to one of China's smallest and least known ethnic minorities. The Tuva people, related to the Tuvan populations of southern Siberia, have lived in this region for centuries, herding livestock and maintaining a way of life that draws on Mongolian, Siberian, and Central Asian traditions in roughly equal measure. In the nearby village of Hemu, often described as one of the most photogenic villages in all of China, despite being almost entirely unknown outside the country, wooden log cabins with steep, snow-shedding roofs cluster along a river valley surrounded by birch forest. In autumn, the birch forests surrounding Hemu turn a saturated, almost luminous gold, and the smoke from cabin chimneys rises in thin vertical columns against the color, creating a scene that looks, in still photographs, almost too composed to be real. It is real. It happens every October, briefly, before the snow arrives and the village settles into a winter that can last 6 months, with temperatures dropping well below -30 degrees Celsius. The Tuva families who live here still practice traditional horsemanship, herding cattle and horses between summer and winter pastures in patterns that have remained largely unchanged for generations. It is, in almost every visible respect, a landscape and a way of life that belongs more to the steppes of Central Asia than to the China of the eastern cities. And for most people, even within China, it remains a region they will never see. Beneath the surface and above the clouds. Underneath the city of Beijing, beneath streets and buildings that millions of people walk and drive over every single day, there is another city. Built during the late 1960s and through the 1970s, during a period of acute tension between China and the Soviet Union, the Beijing Underground City was constructed as a civil defense network designed to shelter the capital's population in the event of nuclear war. At its largest extent, the tunnel network is estimated to have covered roughly 85 square kilometers beneath central Beijing, connecting to nearly every major building in the old city center through hidden entrances disguised as ordinary shopfronts, school buildings, and residential blocks. The construction was undertaken largely by civilian volunteers, working alongside military engineers, often without heavy machinery, digging by hand through Beijing's clay and rock in shifts that ran around the clock for years. The tunnels were equipped, during their period of active maintenance, with ventilation systems, wells, food storage facilities, a hospital, a school, a theater, and even a roller skating rink designed to allow the city's population to survive underground for an extended period if necessary. The geopolitical tension that justified this scale of construction eventually eased. The tunnels fell into disuse, partial disrepair, and for decades existed mostly as an open secret among Beijing residents, a city beneath the city that most outsiders had never heard of, and that the Chinese government, for reasons that shifted over the decades between security concerns and simple bureaucratic inertia, neither widely publicized nor entirely concealed. A small portion of the network was open to a limited number of visitors for a period, allowing a rare glimpse into Cold War-era engineering, concrete corridors, faded propaganda murals, rusted ventilation equipment, signage in the typography of a different political era. Access has varied over the years, and large sections remain officially off-limits or sealed. What remains is one of the most unusual pieces of accidental historical preservation in any major world capital. An enormous, largely forgotten parallel city built in genuine fear of nuclear apocalypse, sitting silently beneath one of the most visited cities on Earth, almost entirely unknown to the tourists walking the streets directly above it. And finally, rising from the mist of Hubei province in central China, a different kind of hidden world entirely. The Wudang Mountains. For over 1,000 years, Wudang has been one of the most important sacred sites in Chinese Taoism, a mountain range considered, in Taoist cosmology, to be the dwelling place of Zhenwu, the Taoist god of the north and of martial perfection. The temples and monasteries scattered across Wudang's 72 peaks were constructed primarily during the Ming dynasty in the early 15th century, under the patronage of the Yongle Emperor, who poured enormous imperial resources into building one of the most architecturally ambitious religious complexes in Chinese history. The Golden Hall, at the summit of the highest peak, is constructed entirely from gilded bronze, assembled in sections at lower elevation and carried, piece by piece, by laborers climbing narrow mountain paths, then reassembled at an altitude where the structure is regularly engulfed in cloud. But Wudang is known, beyond its temples, for something else. This mountain is considered the birthplace of internal martial arts, Tai Chi, Wudang sword, and a broader philosophical and physical tradition that emphasizes the cultivation of internal energy, known as Qi, over external muscular force. According to tradition, a Taoist monk named Zhang Sanfeng developed the foundational principles of internal martial arts on this mountain in the 13th or 14th century, observing, according to legend, a fight between a snake and a crane, and extracting from their movements a philosophy of softness, overcoming hardness that would eventually influence martial traditions throughout China and eventually the world. Today, thousands of students from across China and a small but growing number from abroad travel to Wudang to study at martial arts academies that operate in the shadow of the ancient temples, training in disciplines that connect directly back to a monastic tradition centuries old. At dawn, on the stone courtyards surrounding Wudang's temples, you can watch students and monks practicing Tai Chi forms in the mist, their movements slow, deliberate, and almost completely silent except for the sound of breath and the occasional rustle of robes. Behind them, the temple rooftops curve upward against a backdrop of cloud-wrapped peaks that have been considered sacred for over a millennium, largely unknown to a world that associates Chinese martial arts more with film choreography than with the quiet mountain discipline from which it actually descended. This is the China that exists between the headlines and the skyline photographs. A cliff-sized city that becomes a neon dream at night. A telescope listening to the universe from inside a sinkhole in the jungle. Circular fortresses that have sheltered families for 6 centuries. Choral traditions that developed in complete independence from the rest of the musical world. Rice terraces carved by hand into mountains, still farmed exactly as they were 700 years ago. A lake that won't commit to a single color. A village made of golden birch smoke and Mongolian horsemen. A nuclear bunker the size of a small city, sleeping beneath the streets of the capital. And a mountain where monks have been moving slowly, deliberately, in the mist for over 1,000 years, refining a philosophy that the rest of the world is only now beginning to take seriously. China is larger, older, and stranger than any single narrative can hold. This was 8 pieces of it. There are thousands more. If this video showed you a China you didn't know existed, share it with someone who needs to see it too. Subscribe to Rome Folios if you haven't already. We go deep on the places the world forgot to look at every single week. And leave a comment which of these places surprised you the most. I'll see you in the next one.